Deep in the isolated mountains, where the sun barely touched the ground, there stood a prison known as the strongest and most secure in the world. Its towering walls, equipped with cameras and motion sensors, resembled a military fortress. Anyone who entered was assumed to never leave. Jonathan Kent, a prisoner with a mysterious past and an exceptional mind, found himself trapped within these cold walls after a crime he insisted he didn't commit. For months, he observed every detail of the prison, every guard, every routine, every possible weakness, until he began to design a plan for escape, dangerous, precise, and nearly impossible. One night, while the prison was drowned in deadly silence, Jonathan slipped through abandoned corridors he had discovered by chance during his work in the storage area. The passage was narrow, dark, and filled with the stench of decay, but it was his only path to freedom. Every step could be his last, every sound could betray him. But Jonathan was no ordinary prisoner. He was a strategist, calculating every possibility, anticipating every mistake. As the first light of dawn appeared, he reached what seemed to be a secret exit, a small, neglected door with an old lock. Using his skills, he cracked it open, and for the first time in months, he felt the rush of freedom. Yet the prison was not going to let him go.
Jonathan Kent barely had time to taste freedom before he realized the true danger had only just begun. Outside the prison walls, the rugged mountains stretched endlessly, filled with hidden cliffs and treacherous paths. Every step was a gamble. One wrong move could send him plummeting to his death. The guards had discovered his escape by sunrise. Alarms blared, echoing through the valley. Jonathan knew they would hunt him relentlessly. He had anticipated some pursuit, but the speed and intensity of the response shocked even him. He had to move quickly, thinking faster than his hunters, using every ounce of wit and courage he had. Hours passed as he navigated narrow trails, crawling under branches and slipping across rocky slopes. Each shadow seemed alive, each rustle of leaves a potential threat. He relied on maps memorized from secret corners of the prison library and on his instinct for survival. By nightfall, he reached an abandoned cabin hidden deep in the forest. Inside, he found remnants of old supplies, canned food, a dusty blanket, and a worn journal. It was a temporary refuge, but enough to plan his next move. Jonathan knew the guards would not give up. They would send trackers, dogs, perhaps even helicopters. Yet, despite the fear gnawing at him, a spark of hope burned brighter. He had escaped the world's most secure prison, survived the impossible, and now the real test began, to disappear completely and uncover the truth behind the crime he never committed.
Days had passed since Jonathan Kent's daring escape, yet the world outside the prison felt no less hostile. Every town he passed through seemed suspicious, every stranger's glance a potential threat. He moved like a shadow, changing his appearance, avoiding roads and relying on hidden paths through forests and abandoned villages. The authorities were relentless. Posters with his face appeared in every city, helicopters scanned the countryside, and trained trackers combed the forests. Jonathan knew that one slip could undo months of careful planning. Yet he couldn't afford to hide forever. He had to uncover the truth behind the crime that had trapped him, the conspiracy that put him behind bars.
Jonathan Kent had been on the run for weeks, moving like a ghost through forests, mountains, and abandoned urban landscapes. Every day brought new dangers, patrols that seemed to appear out of nowhere, informants who lurked in cafes, and the ever-present threat of drones scanning the skies. Yet he had learned to adapt, to predict, and to strike when least expected. The documents he had found revealed a sprawling network of corruption, judges, politicians, prison officials, and powerful businessmen who had conspired to frame him. Jonathan realized that escaping the prison was just the first step. Dismantling this conspiracy was the only way to truly claim his freedom. He began by sending encrypted messages to trusted contacts he had never revealed before.
Each message was a carefully calculated strike against the network, exposing secrets to journalists, leaking evidence to the authorities who were not compromised, and creating confusion among his pursuers. It was a dangerous game of shadows, but Jonathan thrived in it. One rainy night, he traced the mastermind behind the conspiracy to a fortified mansion on the outskirts of the city. Lightning flashed across the sky as Jonathan observed the heavily guarded property. Guards patrolled in synchronized patterns, security cameras scanned every angle, and attack dogs roamed the grounds. It was a fortress, far more secure than the prison he had escaped. But he had something the conspirators didn't expect: intelligence, cunning, and the element of surprise. Using a combination of stealth, distraction, and improvised gadgets, Jonathan infiltrated the mansion. He avoided motion sensors, slipped past armed guards, and navigated dark corridors that twisted like a labyrinth. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity. Finally, he reached the main office, where the mastermind, a powerful and ruthless figure, awaited him with a smug smile. "You think you can undo what we've built?" the man sneered. Jonathan's response was calm but lethal. "I've already started." In a tense confrontation, Jonathan revealed the evidence of the conspiracy, recording a confession while manipulating the security system to broadcast it to the outside world. Guards stormed in, but the system's lockdown protocols kept them trapped outside the main office. Chaos erupted. Jonathan used the confusion to slip away once again, leaving the mastermind exposed and powerless. As dawn broke over the city, Jonathan finally stepped onto the streets openly for the first time in weeks. The network that had hunted him was unraveling. His name was being cleared, and the truth he had fought so hard to uncover was finally coming to light. Yet Jonathan knew his journey had changed him forever. The man who had been imprisoned, hunted, and betrayed had become someone unstoppable, a strategist, a survivor, and a shadow who could never be caught again. The world had tried to break him, but Jonathan Kent had not only escaped, it had been the beginning of his true rise.
After weeks of cat and mouse, Jonathan Kent had finally turned the tables on everyone who had hunted him. The corrupt network that had framed him was unraveling piece by piece, each member exposed, each secret revealed. The news spread like wildfire. Journalists, citizens, and even some law enforcement officials who had been unaware of the corruption now rallied behind the truth. Jonathan knew he couldn't just rest. He had to ensure the system would never allow such betrayal again. He meticulously compiled evidence, sending it to trustworthy media outlets, independent authorities, and advocacy groups. Each document, each recording, each proof of manipulation carried the weight of justice, designed to dismantle the powerful figures who had once seemed untouchable. But freedom wasn't only about exposing the guilty. It was also about reclaiming his life. Jonathan returned to the quiet mountains where his journey had begun, finding solace in the stillness that had been absent from his existence for so long. He reflected on the months of running, the nights of fear, and the countless close calls. Every step had tested his mind, body, and spirit, shaping him into someone stronger, sharper, and wiser. Eventually, the legal system caught up with the exposed conspirators. Trials were held, resignations forced, and Jonathan's name was officially cleared. He was free in the eyes of the law, but more importantly, he was free in the deepest sense. He had regained control of his destiny. Yet Jonathan did not seek fame or revenge. He vanished from the public eye, choosing a life of quiet vigilance. Though the world knew his story as one of daring escape and cunning strategy, only he knew the full depth of the trials he had endured and the personal battles he had fought in the shadows. In the end, Jonathan Kent became a legend, not as a criminal, not as a fugitive, but as a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and the relentless pursuit of justice. He had escaped the world's deadliest prison, survived impossible odds, and emerged not only alive, but victorious, a man who had rewritten his fate entirely. The sun rose over the mountains, casting golden light on a man who had faced the darkness and come out stronger. Jonathan's journey was over, but his story would live forever, inspiring anyone who dared to fight for truth against the impossible. The world believed Jonathan Kent's story was over. The media had reported his name cleared, the corrupt officials arrested, and the conspiracy dismantled. To the public, the story ended with justice served. But the truth was far more complicated.
Jonathan knew better than anyone that powerful systems rarely collapsed completely. Even when exposed, their roots often remained hidden deep beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to grow again. For months, Jonathan stayed hidden. He moved quietly from place to place, never staying in one location long enough to be recognized. Sometimes he lived in small villages where nobody asked questions. Other times, he disappeared into large cities where crowds swallowed his identity. He had learned something during his escape. Freedom wasn't just about walking outside prison walls. Freedom was about staying one step ahead of the people who wanted control. Late one evening, while sitting in a small cafe in a quiet coastal town, Jonathan noticed something strange. On a television mounted on the wall, a news report briefly mentioned a new investigation into financial crimes involving several international corporations. The names sounded familiar, very familiar. Jonathan leaned closer to the screen, his instincts sharpened instantly. These companies were connected to the same network that had framed him months ago. The system wasn't dead. It had simply changed shape. That night, Jonathan opened the old encrypted drive he had kept hidden since the night he escaped the mansion. Inside were thousands of files he had copied before disappearing, financial records, secret communications, hidden transactions between powerful people. At the time, he believed those files were simply backup evidence. Now he realized something else. They were the beginning of a much larger story. For weeks, Jonathan studied the files carefully. Every document revealed a deeper layer of corruption spreading across borders: politicians, corporations, security contractors, even intelligence agencies. The conspiracy that once framed him was only one branch of something far bigger. Jonathan faced a choice. He could disappear forever and live quietly, or he could fight again. But this time, the stakes were higher. Because now he wasn't just exposing a corrupt group. He was challenging a system powerful enough to rewrite laws, control information, and erase people completely. One stormy night, Jonathan sat alone in a small apartment overlooking the sea. Rain struck the windows as thunder rolled across the horizon. He opened his laptop and began writing messages. Encrypted messages. Journalists, investigators, independent organizations, people who still believed in truth. Each message contained fragments of the hidden files, just enough to spark curiosity, but not enough to reveal everything. Jonathan had learned from his past mistake. You never reveal the whole truth at once. You release it piece by piece, until the world has no choice but to see it. Days passed. Then the first headline appeared. Global corruption investigation expands. Then another. Secret financial networks exposed. Soon the story began spreading across international media. Powerful figures denied everything. Governments issued statements. Lawyers threatened lawsuits. But the evidence kept appearing, and nobody knew where it was coming from. Jonathan watched quietly from the shadows. For the first time since his escape, he wasn't running. He was controlling the game. The system had tried to destroy him. Now he was slowly dismantling it from the inside. But Jonathan also knew something else. Powerful enemies never disappear quietly. They fight back. And somewhere in the world, someone had already started looking for the man responsible for exposing their secrets. Someone dangerous. Someone patient. Someone who believed Jonathan Kent should never have escaped that prison. As the night grew darker, Jonathan closed his laptop and looked out at the endless ocean. The wind carried the sound of distant thunder. A new chapter had begun. And this time, the hunt was far from over.